They tell you that the deep woods are quiet. They lie.
When you're 50 miles away from the nearest paved road, stuck inside a concrete bunker at 3 o'clock in the morning, the woods aren't quiet. They crawl. They breathe. They whisper against the bulletproof glass of your security booth, like 1,000 frozen fingers trying to find a crack.
My name is Thomas. 2 months ago, I was completely broke. I was looking for any job that didn't require me to look people in the eyes. And that's when I found a listing on a shady forum. Position: Night Surveillance Officer. Location: Station 4, Blackwood Ridge. Pay: $6,000 a month. $6,000. For a guy with 0 experience, that's not just suspicious. That's a death sentence wrapped in a bow. But when you have $40 left in your bank account, you don't ask why a government-funded weather station in the middle of nowhere needs a night guard. You just sign the fucking paper. The manager who hired me was a pale, twitchy guy named Miller. He didn't look me in the eye once. He just handed me a heavy ring of keys, a flashlight, and a small leather-bound notebook.
The rules are inside,
Miller said, his voice shaking slightly as he started his truck to leave me there.
Read them. Follow them. Don't think you're smarter than the book. Thomas, if the power goes out, you have exactly 4 minutes to reach the generator room in the basement. Remember that. 4 minutes.
Before I could ask him what happens after 4 minutes, he slammed the gas and vanished down the muddy trail, leaving me alone with the rain. Station 4 was old. It was a 3-story concrete block built in the late 70s, surrounded by a rusty chain-link fence that looked like it had been chewed through by something with very large teeth. Inside, the air smelled like damp dust and ozone. My job was simple: sit in the main lobby, watch 16 security monitors, and log the barometric pressure every 2 hours. The first 3 nights were completely dead. I sat in my chair, scrolled through my phone, and thought about how easy this money was. I laughed at Miller's warnings. I didn't even open the leather notebook. I thought it was just some corporate safety bullshit. That was my first mistake. On the 4th night, the storm hit. It wasn't just a regular storm. The sky turned a weird, sickly shade of bruised purple, and the wind screamed through the pine trees like a dying animal. The security monitors were flickering, covered in heavy static. At 2:14 a.m., Monitor 7 went completely black. Monitor 7 showed the eastern fence line, the part of the perimeter that bordered the deepest, darkest part of the woods. I leaned forward, tapping the screen. "Come on, you piece of shit target," I muttered. The static cleared for a fraction of a second, just long enough for me to see something that made my stomach drop into my shoes. The fence was torn open. The heavy steel wires were twisted and bent outward, as if something incredibly powerful had pushed through from the inside of the station grounds, heading out into the woods. Or maybe something had come in. Suddenly, the lights flickered. Once, twice, and then with a loud metallic snap from the fuse box, the entire station plunged into pitch black darkness. The silence that followed was heavy. The only light came from the occasional flash of lightning through the window, throwing long, distorted shadows across the concrete walls. My phone screen lit up. 2:15 a.m. 4 minutes. Miller's voice echoed in my head. "You have exactly 4 minutes to reach the generator room."
Panic is a funny thing. It doesn't hit you all at once.
It starts as a cold drop of sweat rolling down your spine, and then it paralyzes your lungs. I fumbled in the dark, my hands shaking so badly I almost dropped my flashlight. I switched it on, the beam cutting through the darkness, reflecting millions of dust motes in the air. I grabbed the key ring and reached into my pocket for the leather notebook. I finally opened it, my flashlight beam shaking against the handwritten pages. Rule number 1. The notebook read in frantic, messy handwriting. If the power fails, do not look at the monitors, even if they turn back on. They do not show the present. Rule number 2. The basement door requires the brass key. If you hear someone knocking on the other side of the basement door, do not open it. Wait exactly 60 seconds. If the knocking stops, it is safe. If the knocking turns into scratching, run back to the lobby and lock yourself in the server cage. My heart was hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. I looked at my phone. 2:16 a.m. 2 minutes left. If I didn't turn the generator on, whatever was in the dark would have full control of the station. But the rule was clear. If you hear knocking, do not open it. Wait 60 seconds. I stood there in the absolute dark, counting the seconds in my head. 1, 2, 3. The knocking stopped.
I let out a breath I didn't realize I was holding. I opened the door wider, about to step onto the stairs when the sound changed. It wasn't knocking anymore. It was a frantic, wet, furious scratching sound, coming up the stairs at an impossible speed. Something was sprinting up the steps toward me in the dark, and it was laughing. A horrific, high-pitched human mimicry of a laugh. They tell you that the deep woods are quiet. They lie. I slammed the heavy iron door shut right in front of whatever the fuck was running up those stairs. Slam. The impact was so hard it shook my entire arm. A split second later, something heavy crashed into the other side of the door. Boom. The metal groaned. I threw my weight against the door, frantically turning the brass key back to the right. Click. Locked. But it didn't stop. The violent scratching started again, right at the bottom of the door, accompanied by that horrific, wet human laugh. It sounded like a grown man trying to choke and laugh at the same time. My phone vibrated in my hand. 2:18 a.m. My 4 minutes were up. The station was officially in deep, dead darkness, and the generator was still offline. Suddenly, the scratching stopped. The silence came back, heavier than before. Then, a voice came through the thick iron door. It didn't sound like a monster. It sounded exactly like Miller, the manager who had left me here.
Thomas. Hey man, open up.
The voice said, sounding casual, but a bit too fast.
The storm messed up the lines. I came back to help you with the generator. Open the door, Thomas. It's cold out here.
My hand reached for the lock automatically. It sounded so real. But then my brain kicked in, and a cold shiver ran through my entire body. Miller drove away in a truck. I would have heard his truck come back. And more importantly, Miller's voice was coming from the inside of the sealed basement.
Thomas, open the fucking door.
The voice suddenly dropped 3 octaves, becoming deep, distorted, and furious. It wasn't Miller anymore. It sounded like multiple people screaming the same words at the same time. Boom, boom. Something began throwing itself against the iron door with insane strength. The hinges were starting to bend. I didn't waste another second. I turned around and sprinted back down the hallway toward the main lobby, my flashlight beam cutting through the dark. As I burst into the lobby, I realized I made a huge mistake. The security monitors, they were on. But the power was still out. The monitors were glowing with a sickly pale green light, running on some impossible energy. Rule number 1. Do not look at the monitors. They do not show the present. I tried to look down at the floor, but my eyes caught Monitor 4 out of pure instinct. Monitor 4 showed the main lobby, the exact room I was standing in right now.
On the screen, I saw myself. I was standing in the center of the lobby, holding my flashlight. But on the screen, there was something else. A tall, impossibly thin figure with long, gray, hairless arms was standing right behind me. Its long fingers were hovering just an inch away from the back of my neck. I spun around, screaming, shining my flashlight behind me. There was nothing there, just empty air.
I looked back at the monitor. On the screen, the creature was still there, but now it was looking directly into the camera lens. It raised one finger to its pale, lipless mouth, making a shh motion, and then, on the screen, it reached out and grabbed the neck of my digital self. In the real world, I felt a freezing cold blast of air hit the back of my neck.
I didn't look at the screens again. I screamed, bolted across the room, and threw myself into the heavy steel server cage, slamming the metal gate shut and locking it from the inside. I collapsed on the floor, breathing like a dying man, holding my flashlight tightly against my chest. The server cage was made of thick steel bars. It was the only safe place, according to the book. And then, my flashlight began to fade. The battery was dying.
I sat in the server cage, staring into the black void of the lobby. The heavy scratching on the iron door down the hall had stopped. The silence was fucking deafening. Suddenly, the monitors flickered again. That sickly green glow lit up the room. I didn't want to look, but I couldn't stop myself.
On monitor 4, the cage I was sitting in was empty. No Thomas. Instead, the screen showed the tall, faceless creature standing inside the cage, holding my dead flashlight. It slowly turned its head toward the camera, and its mouth ripped open into a massive, toothless smile. Then, I heard a whisper. Not from the hallway, not from the basement. It came from right next to my ear, inside the locked cage.
Rule number 4. Thomas.
A wet, glitchy voice whispered.
The book lies too.
Something cold and slimy wrapped around my throat.
The next morning, the rescue team found Station 4 completely empty. The power was back on. The leather notebook was lying on the desk, open to the last page. In fresh, wet ink, a new rule was written. Rule number 5. The next guard will taste better.